and there have been pogroms and riots, but they're not on a very large scale. Not too many people have been killed by Cambodian standards. I mean, in the hundreds or low thousands.
Compared to Khmer Rouge.
Or just compared to the world, it's really not so bad. Isolated pogroms.
How come you don't have Russia and Ukraine?
Why? Because I did the slides before. We'll get to Russia in again. So also, when I said at the beginning, unfortunately, just when I thought this project was over, along comes Crimea, along comes Eastern Ukraine, but certainly along comes Crimea. I'm going to mention that under the Georgian discussion when we get there. Okay, so it turns out this isn't just history. There are several ongoing situations that involve non-trivial settlement activity, which are fairly well known. And one is the Turkish occupation of Cyprus. This would seem to be a particularly aggravated case for the international community, since Cyprus, after all, is a member of the European Union, so this is settlement in European territory.
It happened before.
Before what?
Before
Yes,
Cyprus.
but it's still happening. Okay, so Turkey invades in 1974, grabs about a third of Cyprus, which was an independent nation at that time, and has since had a very explicit program of settling people primarily from Anatolia into the area. The government provides very strong incentives. How strong? So it's not just that they're they're not shaving a percentage off the mortgage. There's a draft exemption for all Turks who move to northern Cyprus. So if you're a young man, facing the prospect of guerrilla war against the Kurds, this is actually it's non-trivial. In addition, there are massive tax benefits, free houses, and so forth. But I think a very interesting benefit is the draft exemption. The question of how many of these settlers have come is one of vast controversy, and there's a big debate. I've seen a variety of numbers. Most numbers put it at around 160,000, and maybe would maybe be 2% of half the population, 1 in 2 people. Which, if you think the nature of the prohibition is to prevent permanent demographic change in the overall character of the territory, this would be a serious case. I have seen, I have been sent, which I can't yet cite, internal European Commission studies, which privately estimate the ratio now at 2 to 1. They estimate the number of settlers somewhat higher, but also they suggest there's been even a greater exodus of the prior inhabitants than had been previously thought. So the European Commission's internal estimate is about 180,000 settlers, 90,000 prior inhabitants, and 40,000 Turkish troops.
So you have double sin. You have both number 1 and number 6.
Yes, well, no, that's the case in almost all these situations. It turns out you can't do number 6 well unless you do number 1 also. And contrary to what has been suggested in our familiar context, it does seem historically that the reason 49.6 was put where it was put is because the prohibition is on the 1-2 punch. You can only move so many people in unless you're moving large numbers of people out. And the historical precedent, of course, was Germany in Poland and Ukraine, where it was primarily moving people out.
מה היה הקצב של העברת הטורקים לקפריסין? What was the rate? At what rate?
So the rate has varied greatly. At what rate they're coming in, yes?
Yes.
Again, so those granular details are very hard to find. It turns out they're only hard to find because no one cares to look. All of the information is out there. If it turns out you want to read things that are written in Turkish. Which I can't do, but had someone translate. So the Turks aren't really hiding too much. So there were a couple different waves. Right after the invasion, it was a big wave, and maybe 40, 50,000 people came then. And it was thought that it kind of stabilized and died down after that, and it was just a trickle. However, we have learned from a variety of interesting documents, including WikiLeaks and diplomatic cables through WikiLeaks, that actually there has been a massive spike in settlement activity since 2004, and in particular since 2008. First of all, there was a referendum in 2004 about what to do, so there was a big spike 2002, 2004, and then a steady rise after that. So in some years, anywhere between 5 and 20,000 a year. Maybe so between 2005 and 2009, which is the last period for which there's clear data, it looks like 12, 15,000 a year, which in absolute numbers, by the way, seems to be potentially greater than the migration into Judea and Samaria. But it's hard to tell. Let's say 12,000 a year, which I don't know. Again, is that a little or a lot? That's actually a lot because the baseline population is low. And again, the only way to analyze this in a sophisticated way is what's the economic gradient? What's the economic gradient? Northern Cyprus would not independently be a net immigration place. It seems. And so you don't see other people wanting to move to Northern Cyprus for the whatever, except for the British vacationers, who we could mention separately. The Parliamentary Assembly of the European Union, which is not it's not the European Parliament, it's the Parliamentary Assembly of the European Union, which is something even more irrelevant than the European Parliament, if you can imagine that, did pass a resolution suggesting that this was not a great thing, and suggesting it might be an international legal problem. That has never been the official position of the European Commission, which is the binding or of the External Action Service of the European Union. Indeed, again, we have a great test. There was an internationally brokered proposal to bring peace, a peace plan. The Annan Plan in 2004, official approval of the United Nations. According to the United Nations, how many settlers had to stay? How many settlers had to leave? Zero.
Greeks remain in North Cyprus.
How many Greeks?
Remain.
900,000.
900,000.
No.
It's 200,000. No, 900. The population of Cyprus is 1 point something million.
How many remain in the north?
8 to 900. There's a great Russian term for this. I don't know if there's
900,000?
No, 8 to 900. The Soviet Union had a word for this. It's called pokazulka. I don't know how to say it. A showpiece. A thing that you show people. There's a village that they kept with these very old Greeks. And there's like a nice church there. And they like to show these people. There's about 8 to 900 very old Greeks.
The rest run away.
It's a Potemkin village, I think would be the term. A demonstration piece. But by the way, there's also Turkish Cypriots, as they're called. That is to say, Cypriots who who are not settlers, Turks. Yeah, they also don't so much like they don't dislike them as much as the Greeks, but they also don't like them. The settlers are almost uniformly from Anatolia, and to these sophisticated Europeanish Turkish Cypriots, they might as well be Kurdish. They might as well. They're culturally very different, and indeed one of the reasons that the Turkish Cypriots are leaving is they don't like living with Anatolians. I'm not justifying. I'm just saying it's the case. And there's a vast, Anatolia is an infinite supply of humans. So they're worried about where this goes. So again, in the Annan Plan, none of the settlers are required to leave. 45,000 plus all of those who were born there get citizenship and can stay, and the rest can stay under various alternate form. Interestingly, the Greeks, of course, the Greeks at Cyprus rejected the proposal, and the Turks accepted it. The Europeans today like to say the Turks were very open-minded, They accepted this proposal, and the Greeks rejected it. The Greeks blocked peace. But of course, one can only imagine what would be said about in other contexts about a peace proposal that does not require. That does not require. The Greeks say, "Of course, we didn't take it. We don't want the Anatolians." Who says that? That's the whole problem.
This program would then make Cyprus one country again?
Yeah, exactly. One country with
Federal system.
With almost 100,000.
more. No, according to the European Community, 108,000. So that would be now more than 20% of the total population of the island. Okay, let's move on to Morocco and Western Sahara. So again, Western Sahara is somewhat different. It's more like East Timor, less like Cyprus in a formal fashion, because again, Morocco was leaving. The United Nations Security Council called for a referendum in Western Sahara, for Western Sahara to exercise self-determination. Before that could happen, Morocco invaded with large numbers of civilians and also non-trivial numbers of soldiers. And there has been a war there ever since with the, you asked, what did the local population think about it? The Sahari do not, well, the indigenous population, they don't like it at all. They have a government which is recognized by several, 50, 70 countries. They control maybe 1/3 of the territory, but it's not the third you'd want to be in. So, could you imagine anyone building a wall in occupied territory?
But to be fair, the rest of the 2/3, we wouldn't like to live there.
Along the coast, it's livable. So Morocco built a structure called the berm. You can see it from space. The berm, which was built in the 1980s, is it's not a wall. It's a system of grid-like cordons cutting off the different various towns, and then a long barrier along the side to push the Sahara into the desert, which is where most of them are. And I would love to know who built it for them. It's really, they couldn't have built it themselves. The Moroccan army, it's impossible that the Moroccan army actually built it. What? Israel helped with the berm.
I saw that one.
So Morocco has had a very active settlement program, and again, it's the kind, unlike more familiar contexts, and very much like Indonesia, you can't get from Java, the main Indonesian island, to East Timor without the government taking you there, because it's an island without a real serious port. You can't get to Western Sahara without being taken, because there's the Sahara in between. And so Morocco...
Same with Cyprus.
What?
Turks got a ship from there.
Yeah, but there was at least some small ports you could theoretically... Western Sahara is uncrossable by regular people. But indeed people crossed en masse, and there may be 100,000 Moroccan settlers. Again, nobody is counting them. The Sahari say more, other people say less. But Morocco has formally annexed these provinces. They call them the southern provinces.
Any reason economic benefits?
Why does Morocco want?
What does Morocco want? Well, first of all, they want they want the Sahari to not be able to get it. That's the primary thing they want.
It is phosphates.
Why have it? But it was before the phosphates. They wanted it because they thought it was theirs, historically. Something about the 19th century. They have a long story. They have a long story which I can't follow. They have something about the 19th century. Also, but the whole thing is very complicated. Mauritania also invaded. There were, one of the funny things about our present conflict is that people say there's a concern to the international community because it's likely to cause an international war. But Western Sahara has been a three-way international war involving Morocco, Western Sahara, and most prominently Algeria, which is the supporter of the Sahari. To keep it out of the hands of Algeria, there's a lot of stories. There's a lot not to like about the Sahari government. It's quite clear in Morocco that the settlers are the absolute majority in the territory. So, how many international documents have condemned the Moroccan colonization in legal or political terms? Not a single one. Not a single one. Nor has anyone said it violates international law, or even that it's not nice. Indeed, there have been a series of internationally backed peace plans for Western Sahara, the Baker Plan 1 and the Baker Plan 2, because peace plans never die. And the most amazing, not only these were two-step peace plans. So the first step is to call for a referendum on the future of the territory. In Baker 2, the Moroccan settlers get to vote. Given that they're the majority, the outcome is preordained. So, which is why the Sahara did not like Baker 2. Polisario, which is why the Polisario government did not like Baker 2. And needless to say nothing of any calls for the removal of the settlers. But this isn't limited to the Middle East. It's not limited to Cyprus, and we actually have other countries involved in settlement enterprises. A particularly interesting one is Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's interesting because Armenia, it's not a great democracy. It's really not much of a democracy at all. But it's not a totalitarian country. They do, it's more a corrupt country than an autocratic country. Their problem is bribery, not excessive governmental power. And they have occupied not just Nagorno-Karabakh, but also the Lachin corridor, unbeknownst to the international community, since its war with Azerbaijan, which by the way seems to be resuming in the past few weeks, and have had a very active program of transferring settlers there. Why do I say active? It is impossible to get people to move to Armenia, let alone Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia itself has massive net migration. People are leaving Armenia. There's really no one left in Armenia, but they still manage to find people to come to
lot of Israeli.
Nagorno-Karabakh. The European Parliament has criticized this. The Azerbaijanis are very quick to criticize it. Okay, so what can we learn? I just wanted to see what do you do with settlers, but it turns out the most interesting thing is what do you call a settlement? So all we know, what is settlement? Deportation or transfer. Well, what do you have to do to make that happen? We don't know. Right? So when you look at the data, in the vast majority of these cases, the international community never says that it's a violation of Article 49.6. So what that suggests is the bar for what constitutes deportation or transfer would require massively organized, perhaps near forcible government action to constitute deportation or transfer. What about other questions like economic activity in occupied territory? Well, here we see a Michelin shop and an Adidas franchise in Turkish-occupied northern Cyprus. So apparently there is not any prohibition on international companies opening shop in occupied territories.
No boycott on Adidas.
What?
There's no boycott on Adidas.
There's no boycott on Adidas. Europe has extensive economic cooperation with Morocco regarding Western Sahara, in which they actually pay Western Sahara for access to Western Saharan natural resources, phosphates and fisheries in particular. Moroccan-made Western Saharan products are sold in Europe, labeled "Made in Morocco" per agreement with Europe. And finally, just because we're in an academic context, but what if you were to do something really horrible, like establish a university in occupied territory? So it turns out, since 1974, Turkey has established 8 to 10, depending on how you count, universities in northern Cyprus. Indeed, after tourism and real estate, education is the primary foreign attracting business in northern Cyprus. They're designed to attract both Turkish settlers, for lack of a better word, and other kinds of students looking for discounted education. Many of these universities have joint degree and student exchange programs with British and other European universities, and this has not been condemned. Many of them are members of Erasmus, the European Education Cooperative, which again suggests that whatever deportation or transfer means, it would probably not be clear that the establishment of the university would constitute settlement activity. So again, just the bottom line, we have a lot of data on this phenomenon. It turns out that, and I just want to very quickly say what my point is. The point here is not to show international hypocrisy. I'm not interested in that. And indeed, that's just, it's too easy. And it's not of any legal value. The point here is to show the lack of international hypocrisy. With one trivial exception, let's say, with one exception, the approach of the international community has been remarkably consistent, that non-forced civilian migration into an occupied territory does not violate the Geneva Convention, and even if it does, that does not in any way prejudice economic activity in the territories, the lives or future or homes of the settlers, and really the story is not one of hypocrisy, it's one of consistency. And in international law, you look to this, you don't say, well, maybe everyone else is violating the rules. No, if you have 9 points on a graph and one way off, you fit the line to the 9 points, not to the other one, so it seems there's actually a surprisingly clear and consistent legal rule. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Professor Kontorovich.
Ready to